Architects of the GOP's corporate tax plan, Representative Devin Nunes of California, a key member of the Ways and Means Committee. Sir, good to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Tell us why you like the tax plan and why it's so important to have what many people are concerned about, a border adjustment tax.
Well, this is really the first time in 100 years since the income tax was put into place that we have a chance to get rid of it. So this puts us on par with the rest of the world. The only countries that don't have a border adjustability in their plan are countries like Somalia, Yemen, Libya. So it's quite a small list of countries that don't have this. So this is not controversial. And quite frankly, it's a little offensive that some of the major American companies that are importers who do business worldwide are even raising concerns of this plan, because I don't see them going to Germany or Mexico or China to raise these concerns. And I think Donald Trump has been exactly right to call people out on this. If
I'm a major retailer, why wouldn't I be nervous when I see a 20% tax on imports?
Because this is not a tax. It's border adjustment, and it's what they do in all other countries. So I know very few people that are selling retail in the United States that aren't selling retail into Asia or into Europe. So this is nothing new. It's nothing different. Perhaps if you're just an accountant and you're looking at this statically and looking at your old business model, yeah, you could see where it would be an added tax. But in fact, it's not, because your business model will change. Your investment strategy will change, because this encourages investment in the economy. This is why it creates jobs. We get out of debt financing and into equity financing. So it's a plan that will really make America great again.
That's a long-term view, but I mean, to Michelle's point, for a lot of the retailers, basically you're saying, for the retailers who are already operating on very, very thin margins, I mean, as you know, the department store sector, for one, is really struggling because there's a real fundamental change to their business model. And for some, this is viewed as sort of a nail in the coffin of these guys. And you're telling them it's not a tax, and everybody else in the world does it.
Yeah, well, it's
a very unsatisfying answer for the retailers and for the people who work for them.
Well, that would be a ridiculous statement. So a retailer is going to go out of business if the retailers go out of business. The only thing that could actually keep them in business would be growth, job growth, economic growth in this country. And so if you're a retailer, no matter where you're at, you're all going to be paying the same exact price, whether you're selling retail products at a store in New York or in California. Everyone's going to be under the same system. You'd also have to assume that there would be no currency adjustment. And every economist has said that the currencies would quickly adjust to this change in the system.
So how, Congressman, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, because I find it really very, very complicated, and I'm sure you accept that on some levels it is unfamiliar and complicated.
Yes, I think that's accurate.
How would the tax apply to a large American corporation in the restaurant business that sells only American-sourced food to American consumers, has no foreign operations at all? Would they then pay no corporate tax because they're not in the business of importing or exporting, or would they pay some corporate tax if, for example, they got their avocados from Mexico?
So let me explain. So I think there's two components to this. So you have the border adjustment, okay, and that is for either things that are exported or products that are imported. On the other hand, you still have what's called a cash flow tax. So every company in America, if you're a C Corp, you'll pay a 20% tax on your cash flow. If you're a pass-through, you'll pay 25%. In addition to that, you will have this import and export border adjustment. That essentially what it is for things that you import, it is no longer, it can no longer be deducted. So that's the difference. I think that's maybe the piece that
you no longer deduct it as a cost, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And if you export, you no longer have to pay tax on that.
So then, explain to me, because again, I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. Yeah. A company like BMW that manufactures a very complex product in Spartanburg, South Carolina, with components that come from the United States, components that come from Asia, components that come from Germany. How does that get figured out?
So let's say that a third of the products come from the United States. Well, those would not be taxed. If a third of the products come from Asia, those would not be deductible. If a third of the products come from Europe, those would not be deductible. So in the price of the car, you'd have 2/3 of the components that wouldn't be deductible.
Representative, we've heard a lot from the House, and clearly there are many members of the House of Representatives, authors of Paul Ryan's A Better Way, the Blueprint, who are supportive of this. It is not clear to me that the Trump administration would be or is supportive of this. Have you heard anything from any members of the transition team that he likes this idea or they like this idea? And what if he doesn't?
Well, what you've seen is that you've seen Donald Trump very clearly state that the tax systems that are in place in foreign countries are very unfair to U.S. job producers and job creators. And he wants to fix that. So there's really only two ways you can fix it. You can either put our tax structure on the same field as everyone else's tax structure, or you can go the tariff route. And those are really the only two ways that you can fix the problem if you're really looking at the unfair systems in other countries. But I do think it's fair, assessment, I think, from a couple of you that had said it, and that is that this is really a completely new tax regime. We are doing away with income tax in this. So all business activity in this country would be under this very simple tax system that's going to revolutionize I think, tax structures all over the world, because I think other places around the world would have to move to a very similar system like ours.
Representative Nunes, I'm going to bring in Larry Kudlow. He was going to be on after you, but we've just sat him down, and he disagrees. You don't think this would be eliminating the income tax for corporations?
Well, Devin, if you want to repeal the 15th Amendment, I'm fine with that. I've said this a million times down through the years. What you're introducing here is there's a problem that exists, but this is not the right solution, in my view at least. And I don't want a national value-added tax. I don't want a national sales tax. I don't even want partial value-added taxes. One of the issues here is Mexico reneged on the original deal back in whenever it was, 93 or 94. They had about a 5% VAT tax, which applied to imports from America, and they said they wouldn't raise it, and they did. They raised it twice. It's now 16%. So our imports, Mexican imports to the U.S., duty-free. Our imports to Mexico, 16%. That's wrong. I agree with you. That's wrong. But I don't agree that we have to have border adjustability, and we have to subsidize exports, and we have to go through all this rigmarole. And I strongly, Congressman, want to, with all due respect, disagree. We are not getting rid of the corporate income tax. That is in no one's plan. That is not in the Ryan plan. That is not in the Brady plan. That is not in the Trump plan. This is an add-on.
Yeah, Larry, I think we're actually saying the same thing, and we're in complete agreement. So no one wants a VAT, and at the same time, no one wants tariffs. And so what this border adjustment does is it simply puts in where either it's non-deductible or non-taxed, and that essentially does the same thing. It creates a simple border adjustment scenario. When I talk about getting rid of the income tax, what I'm talking about is the traditional income tax, the traditional complicated income tax. And as you know, you're a big fan of expensing, the way that we're moving to a cash flow system versus this archaic income tax that we have. So yes, companies will still pay tax on the income that they earn, but they will be encouraged to invest. And if they invest, as you know, the rates will become very, very low. So I think we're actually saying the right thing, or the same thing. And what we have to do is familiarize the American people with how this system works. Because we will accomplish the very goal that you have, Larry.
Right. I just got to say, look, I know this is the kind of thing that could doom business tax reform, which, in my opinion, is the most important pro-growth element and really the heart of President-elect Donald Trump's plan to spur economic growth and jobs. Okay, I think this.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because I think we're going to get hung up on it, just like we are now. I think what Congressman Nunes is saying, for example, about replacing our tax system with a cash flow system, that's an entirely different concept.
Right.
Senator Cruz ran on this in the Republican primaries and lost and was very unpopular. I don't think Americans want a national sales tax. Polls show they don't. Candidates who run on this stuff.
Let me ask you this, though.
We're taking a problem, which I agree exists, but the solution is vastly greater than this problem.
But what if the choice is this versus a punitive import tariff, Larry, to achieve Donald Trump's goals? I mean, you just heard Representative Nunes. He doesn't want tariffs. I mean, you see what I'm saying? Is this a better choice?
All of it? No, it's not a better choice, because this is systemic. I don't want systemic. I want to deal with the problems. Now, we may have to renegotiate every single one of these trade treaties, and nobody better than Donald Trump, in my opinion, okay? But I don't want to change our entire tax system right now.
Okay.
The country's not ready for that. I will say this, with respect to just focus on that. It applies to China and elsewhere.
And Representative Nunes has to go soon. So,
all right, so
yeah.
Congressman, look.
Can't keep him here all day.
Congressman, look, the issue here is Mexico reneged on the original NAFTA deal with respect to border taxes, okay? They said they would keep their VAT at, and I'm going to use 5%. I don't know if that's precisely the right number, but it was a low number. And they didn't. They raised it in 2 stages to 16%. That's unfair. And Trump is right about that. Every step of the way, he's been right. But to renegotiate this into some kind of massive border adjustment, which will penalize imports and subsidize exports, that is an exercise in government planning and complexity that I believe is doomed to fail. And if you stay with this, Congressman, I think the whole corporate tax thing reform, which is the most important pro-growth measure, will go down the drain over this.
Let me give Congressman Nunes a final word here, because we do have to move on. You can address what Larry said, or address the question that I'd like to pose to you.
Okay.
What would you say to what I think is implicit in what Larry has just said? That this proposal is a national sales tax, or is basically a backdoor tariff?
Well, I think this is a very simple way to border adjust that's not a VAT and not a sales tax and not a tariff. And actually, I think we owe this to Larry, because Larry's been great throughout the years. A lot of people have worked on this over the decades, Larry, going back to David Bradford, who you knew well. And so I think part of what we need to do is we need to get Larry over here to Congress and talk in depth about this behind closed doors, because what we're really saying is the same thing. We want economic growth. We want to have business taxes completely revamped in this country, because we want to encourage people to invest in the economy so that jobs can be created, so that Donald Trump can be successful. And at the same time, we don't want to have a trade war of any kind, even though I do agree that a lot of these trade agreements need to be renegotiated.
Devin, all I would ask, I'll come down for that conversation, by the way. That's a great idea. Thank you. And my dear friend Kevin Brady, the best. He's the best of the best. But read Steve Forbes' column in Forbes about this issue, because he absolutely trashes this idea, and he makes points that are good supply-side points, and we want simplicity, not complexity, and I don't want a trade war.
Gentlemen, thank you for a robust and enlightening conversation.
I love you, Devin. You're a good man. You're a great American,
Thanks
Devin.
for coming
You're a
on.
great American.
Thanks, guys.
We've been talking about this for days.